Perfect. All good to go, Mary.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay, first off? Great stuff, and delighted to be in your company virtually today. We have a great webinar lying ahead of us. It is entitled Opportunities for Irish Business in a Vastly Changing Environment, and it's a Q&A with Minister of State for Trade Promotion, Digital and Company Regulation, Minister Robert Troy. My name is Mary O Neill. Jenny kindly asked me to facilitate today's webinar, which of course is hosted by Dungarvan and West Waterford Chamber, and thanks to Connors and Co-Accountants as well. Just before I hand over to Chamber President David Walsh, there are a couple of things I just want to say to you. First of all, to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So, you know, hopefully you're all okay with that, but it's important that you know that from the off, that there is a record button going to be on. I think it's actually on already. And also, I know a number of you would like to ask the Minister some questions, and you will be given an opportunity to do that. It'll shortly open to the floor. But can I just ask you, in order to kind of have you know, a little bit of a running order on this, that if you do have a question, can you use the chat facility and just send the question to me, and I'll see them coming in, and then I can line up the people who've asked them. And either you can ask it yourself if you want, or I'll ask it on your behalf to put the questions to Minister Troy. So it's up to yourselves, but if you do, just give me a little heads up over the chat that you fancy asking a question. We will 100% facilitate that. The webinar will last roughly around an hour as well. We'll move it along nice and briskly. And on that note, without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Chamber President David Walsh.
Thanks, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our meeting today. I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Robert Troy, and thank him for his time, obviously, today. I'm not sure how well Robert knows Dungarvan, West Waterford, but our chamber is well ahead of its peers, I suppose, in size. We've got over 280 members, and we represent employers with over 3,000 employees. We have fabulous voucher sales, keeping business local, I suppose, and we broke €800,000. So for a small enough community in the west of the county, it's a very phenomenal effort, actually. One of our sub-members, actually, Shane Connors, has been for a few years now, Connors and Co-Accountants. I'd just like to thank them for sponsoring today's event. Robert Troy is Robert Troy is the Minister of State responsibility for trade promotion at the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. He was appointed to this role in July 20. He's a Fianna Fáil TD for Longford Westmeath and was elected to Dáil Éireann in his first attempt in February 2011, and obviously been re-elected in subsequent elections afterwards. Robert contributed hugely, actually, in the last election for Fianna Fáil, splitting the vote unbelievably so with his running mate in Longford. Probably put his own seat a little bit in jeopardy, but it was a super result in a difficult election, I suppose, so fair play to him on that. Robert has been a front bench spokesperson since his election to Dáil Éireann. He's had various briefs. He's covered arts and heritage, children and youth affairs, transport, tourism and sport, and obviously most recently business, enterprise and innovation. On a personal level, Robert is a proud Ballinaccarrigan man and hails from the same village as my wife Joanna. They were actually in school together, and Robert was a guest at our wedding a few years ago. We brought 100 visitors from Dungarvan up to Westmeath, and we have many visitors coming down here. So we've got a fabulous greenway down here, but there's actually an excellent greenway up in Westmeath as well. So any cyclists on board, feel free to visit Westmeath as well as Waterford. We've all had a difficult year. Robert's brief is extremely important to all of our members in Dungarvan West Waterford Chamber. As Minister of State for responsibility for trade promotion at the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Thankfully, numbers are coming down now. A bit of light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. The vaccine program obviously is starting to roll out. My wife's uncle, actually, John and Ballinaccarrigan, is actually getting his injection as we speak, and Robert will actually know him quite well. He's buzzing at the moment. So look, hopefully these positive indicators can start to reflect its way back down to local businesses like all our people on the call today. So I'll just hand you back over to Mary. Thank Robert again for his time, and Mary, let's facilitate Shane of Connors and Co to have a couple of words before we actually start proper.
Thanks very much, David. And yeah, now we will hand over to Shane Connors from Connors and Co, who's going to say a few brief words. Shane. You just muted there, Shane.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks very much, Mary, and thanks, David, for the introduction. So Connors and Co are a full service audit, accountancy, taxation, corporate finance, and business advisory firm. with 2 partners based in offices in the southeast, Waterford, and more recently in Kilkenny. We're expanding rapidly. We're an ambitious firm, not just for ourselves, but also for our clients. And in terms of offering additional services and so on, a critical cornerstone of our business strategy is the digitalization of our business and the digitalization of client businesses and assisting them through that process. So some of the things we've done in the last 12 months, COVID probably accelerated 1 or 2 of them, to be honest, but we sat down just prior to COVID and we came up with a digital marketing strategy ourselves. We've upgraded the website thanks to the trading online voucher, which was very well at the time was very welcome, I can tell you. We've installed a piece of AI software which streamlines the bookkeeping and accounting services for our clients. We carry out our client meetings remotely, and the staff work remotely, so there's a greater level of efficiency, less time in the car for me, less time driving the roads of the southeast. So much more focused service offering, and then it also allows us then to generate real-time financial reports and to develop a portal for clients. Some of the things we're looking at in the next 12 months, we're looking at developing some online diagnostic toolkits for our clients in various areas such as fundraising, mergers, acquisitions, and data analytics. And we're also looking at going down the paperless office and data rooms and so on. In terms of the event today, we're delighted to sponsor it and to be associated with us. We're actually very excited about the contents of the SME Task Force report. We think it's a really strong document. Identifies current areas of weaknesses, which include access to funding and lack of training, which is something we've been speaking about ourselves for quite some time. And it also gives a very clear strategy for SMEs to overcome many of those. So greater access to funding, education and training, collaboration locally and nationally with groups of professional networks, strategic alliances, and of course, and very importantly, an increased role for chambers of commerce such as West Waterford. In terms of our own role in the process, we'd like to get involved whatever way we can, become a voice for Waterford and the Southeast, if that's the appropriate way to go. Avail of some of the supports that are hopefully coming down the track ourselves, and more importantly, to help our clients navigate through the process, and to be able to compete not just nationally but internationally in an increasingly crowded market space. So thanks for your time. Enjoy the event, and I'll hand you back now to Mary. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much there, Jane. Really interesting conversation, and really interesting to hear actually about how you've used digital marketing and AI technology as well to adapt. It's amazing what companies have done in such a fast time. So fair play to you guys as well at Connors & Co. I'm now going to hand it over to Minister of State Robert Troy, who's going to speak to us for a few minutes, after which time the floor will be open to questions. Minister Troy.
Thank you very much, Mary, and you can all hear me okay, you can. So to David, your president, to thank him for the invitation to speak with you today. And I noticed 2 of my colleagues on the line, Eamon Quinlan and John O'Leary. I hope I'm not missing anybody else, but if I am, my apologies. But I'm, as introduced, I'm Minister of State at the Department of Enterprise. The key focus of our department over the last 12 months has been on supporting business probably to the most challenging time in decades. And we've done that by introducing the necessary support, such as the wage subsidy, the CRIS payment, tax warehousing, restart grants, suspension of commercial rates for businesses, the trading online voucher that Stephen alluded to earlier on, business continuity scheme. And next week, we will launch a new scheme called the COVID Business Aid Scheme. It's for businesses who have been locked out of the CRIS payment. So that's 4,000 per quarter for businesses who are in irratable premises and have been locked out of the crisp payment. And I can provide more details offline or later on if anyone has a particular query in relation to that. In the area of company law, the CRO has been very flexible in relation to filing dates and return dates, and we've increased the time and threshold for the protection of businesses through examinership process. So a lot has been done in the last 12 months, and the core aim has been on supporting viable businesses get through these challenging times, and through them we will get. My own area of responsibility, we've delegated functions as junior ministers in the department, and my area is trade and company law, trade promotion. And a small open economy like ours, we do depend so much on international trade. And our ambition, and the ambition in the programme for government, is to increase the number of SMEs who are trading internationally and to help those who are already trading to scale up. That's primarily done through trade missions. Unfortunately, they can't happen at the moment, but a lot of that work has moved to the virtual online presence, and trade missions continue virtually. We're very fortunate as a country that Enterprise Ireland is doing remarkable work in terms of supporting businesses trade internationally, and they have a physical presence in 47 locations internationally, and they're supporting a business make that move. One of the big areas that's coming down the line from that perspective is the area of CETA, the Canadian-European Trade Agreement, and we have to try and get that ratified through the Dáil, and a little bit more challenging considering one of our Green members are taking a court case to the High Court on the validity of that. But anyway, that's something that I have to navigate over the coming weeks, and I've no doubt we will be able to do that. In my area of responsibility from a company law perspective, I think it's very important that company law is responsive to the needs and the challenges of businesses. And that's not to shortchange or undermine from an ethical perspective, but to ensure that it is responsive to the needs of businesses. And a priority area that we're focusing on at the moment, and one which your members may be interested in, is in the area of a summary rescue package. The examinership process is internationally recognized as a good model, but it is very costly and it's prohibitive to many smaller businesses. And you also always have a situation where businesses may get into difficulty, but they are viable if just offered the opportunity to restructure. Before July of this year, it is my intention that the legislation will be gone through the Oireachtas and will create an administrative process, taking it away from the courts to ensure that viable small businesses have the opportunity to restructure and to come out and trade successfully again. And I think that's going to be critically important in the context of the 12 months that businesses have just come through in terms of COVID, with an overburden of debt hanging over so many of them. So that's important, and the timing of it is important, because as the economy opens up and as the restrictions lift, the supports will taper off. And some businesses will need that restructuring opportunity to move forward. And that, as I said, that's our intention to have that in before the summer recess, July of this year. Another area that I have direct responsibility for is the Personal Injuries Assessment Board. The cost of insurance, nobody on this webinar today will need me to tell you the huge impact that insurance has on business. There is a commitment in the programme for government to address this. There is a cabinet subcommittee has been established, of which I'm a member, and we are going to ensure that we bring down the cost of insurance. One of the big issues is going to be the Judicial Council. They are going to announce the new awards this weekend. It's anticipated. That we hope will bring the awards, benchmark them against international awards, and we'll see a significant decrease in the awards that are being given out for issues such as soft tissue injuries, whiplash, etc. We are totally out of kilter with the rest of Europe in the terms of the awards we're paying out, and obviously that is having an effect on insurance costs. For my part, my responsibility is reforming the Personal Injuries Assessment Board, broadening its remit, ensuring that they can deal with more cases, and that will result in less cases going through the courts and less legal fees, again helping to bring down the cost of insurance. Your sponsor today, Shane Connors, mentioned the whole area of AI and how that has helped his business. I think AI is possibly the most transformative piece of technology that's out there at the moment, and is going to transform how business operates and how we respond to societal challenges. My department and my area of responsibility we will launch a new national artificial intelligence strategy in the coming weeks. That strategy is has been put together following interdepartmental work, because it's across many different departments, and it will poise Ireland to be a leader in the area of artificial intelligence. Two final points I just want to reference, and two areas that I'm heavily involved in myself. The SME Task Force, I think someone alluded to it at the beginning. You will be aware that the OECD came in and conducted a review on our SMEs, and they published a report in October 2019. That report fed into a task force that was established in July of last year. That task force was made up of industry leaders, entrepreneurs, people who have actually created jobs. And I'm quite conscious that many politicians don't create jobs. We just are in a position to create policies that can support job creation. But we were very fortunate to have a really good group of people who came together and who fed into that SME task force. As a result of that, a document was published with objectives, and we're now have convened an implementation group that's chaired jointly by Minister of State English and I, and we're working through the recommendations of that task force to start implementing the key recommendations over the weeks and months ahead. So I think that's going to have a huge impact on supporting our SMEs going forward. And finally, your president mentioned about only visiting virtually today, but I will have reason and cause to visit physically in the weeks and months ahead when restrictions allow, because our department is updating the regional enterprise plans. There's 9 regions nationally. Waterford is part of the Southeast region, and we're publishing a new plan for each region, a regional enterprise plan up until 2024. That will bring the key stakeholders together from the local enterprise office, the Chamber of Commerce, the county councils, Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, a bottom-up plan. It'll be chaired by a senior industry representative from the Southeast region, and we will focus on region-specific ecosystem gaps and act on the strengths and the opportunities for each region. I've been given the responsibility for the Southeast, so I will be working closely with the stakeholders in the Southeast over the coming weeks and months, with a view to publishing a new Southeast regional plan in September, October of this year. So I suppose it's timely. That process starts in the next fortnight, so it's timely that I had the opportunity to speak to a Chamber of Commerce in that region today. And I think I've spoken enough now, and I leave it open to questions and answers. And I look forward to that engagement, because I think, as I said at the outset, I'm very conscious that most people that are on this call today are people who have created jobs in their respective fields. They know what the challenges are, and they know how government can help in terms of responsive policies, and I'm keen to hear from them this afternoon.
Thanks very much for that, Minister Troy. And we do have some questions coming in already. So on behalf of Thomas McCabe, Thomas wanted to know, Minister, when in your opinion will we see the return of non-contact sports such as golf and tennis? And I know there's been a little bit of conversation already about travel and restrictions being lifted, and we've heard the 5th of April as a date where maybe there might be some easing. I know these questions can be hard to answer definitively, but would you have an opinion on it?
I don't want to raise anyone's expectation and say that I have a definitive timeline. I don't. What the government has said is that we're keeping the situation monitored and reviewed on a weekly basis because it continues to evolve. The good news is that the numbers continue to go down, very positive numbers in the last 2 days, and the rollout of the vaccine is going well. So that will enable a gradual easing of restrictions come the 5th of April. And the key, I suppose, determining factors in relation to the ease of restrictions is the numbers of people who are contracting the virus on a daily basis, the number of people who are in hospitals, the R rate, and how the vaccine is going. And all 4 are going in the right direction. So I would be optimistic that on the 5th of April, there will be an easing of restrictions. And clearly, where you start first is where the area of least contact. So, sports like fishing and golf have minimus contact. But I don't want to say it'll definitely happen on the 5th of April, but things are moving in the right direction.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much for that. Eugene Tobin has a question, I believe. Eugene is going to ask it himself there, Eugene, if you want to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for clearing up the bit on the insurance. You know, it's a big problem for businesses with them. A lot of business actually closing due to insurance costs. But what I want to ask you today is, I want to ask you about the SBCI scheme. You know, it's actually maxed out, and you know, it's a good way for small businesses to get loans, try and grow. And now with the Ulster Bank leaving, and that, have you any plans on expanding the scheme?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I suppose the government has put in a range of loan guarantee schemes that offer access to appropriate finance to businesses. SBCI operates 4 loan schemes on behalf of our department, the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. The COVID-19 Credit Guarantee Scheme, that was the largest loan guarantee scheme in the history of the state. The scheme provides 2 billion in lending, a total, and I'm just looking to get the right figures to give you an accurate here, a total of 4,513 applications have been submitted. That was up until the 12th of February, for a value of 300 million, with 2,912 loans drawn down to a value of 165 million. So there's huge capacity in that scheme left. As I said, it provides for 2 billion in lending, and only 165 has been drawn down, with 300 million committed to. So even taken into what's committed, there's quite a significant amount of funding left there. It's ran through commercial banks, and a number of non-bank lenders and a number of credit unions has also been approved to provide that scheme in the last number of weeks. The other scheme that is ran through my department is the Future Growth Loan Scheme, and a new provider came on stream in the last fortnight in relation to that scheme, Close Brothers. They're a non-financial institution lending agency, and they're going to be able to make a further 30 million euro available in supporting long-term investment for eligible business. And then there's 2 other schemes, the COVID-19 Working Capital Scheme and the Brexit Loan Scheme. And again, both schemes aren't maxed out, so there is capacity there, Eugene.
Thanks very much for that, Eugene and Minister Troy. Regina Mangan has a question next. Regina, if you want to unmute yourself there for the Minister.
Thank you. Minister, it's great to have you here. And as a business owner for the last 24 years, I'm passionate about Waterford, I'm passionate about employment and our community in general. And you spoke about the ecosystem gap. I think we all know that the biggest ecosystem gap in Waterford is the lack of university. So as you're here today, I would ask you, implore you actually, to get government to give us a commitment on the financial commitment into the Waterford campus, because we are in all of the government plans, Waterford, and in your conversation there, Minister, is that Waterford, you know, we're the capital of the Southeast, and if the university is going to be meaningful for the Southeast, considerable capital and funding is required to build the footprint, because the size of the campus isn't adequate to grow the students, to double them from 7,000 to 14,000 in terms of degree. We need a commitment, and that lack of commitment is concerning. I would say, I would implore you to go back with that, please.
Okay, Regina, and I can't give a commitment on behalf of the government in an area that's under a different department than my own today, but I certainly will give a commitment that I'll bring your message back, and I will engage with Mary Butler, who's my colleague and a Minister of State in this government as well. I do know that a university for the Southeast was specifically mentioned in the programme for government, so there was that initial commitment is given from a programme for government perspective, but obviously these things need to be backed up with the necessary resources. So I'll take the message back to my colleagues in government. Minister Harris obviously is the Minister of State, Minister with responsibility for higher education, but I've no doubt Mary Butler will be working on it also.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Regina. Jenny Beresford is next with a question, Minister.
Yes, Minister, thank you very much for coming today. We really appreciate your time and your engagement with us. I have, I suppose, two questions, but it's of the same nature. The business continuity voucher and the trading online voucher were absolutely essential to the survival of businesses and to the transformation of businesses as well this year, and without which an awful lot of businesses wouldn't be in any way active at the moment. But I suppose there's a comment and a request in this, in that through the continuity voucher and the online trading, it was mainly for a consultancy, and there was no space for training within that grant funding. And I suppose what I'm lobbying you for is that in the future, if the grants are made available, that at least a portion of it be for training, because it's for the sustainability, I suppose, of businesses, for businesses to be able to sustain the activity that they're doing. If a consultant has been setting it up and doing it for them, they're not necessarily going to be aware of the operations around how best to for the functionality of their business to operate online. So that's one thing. And then the other area is that, based again on businesses embracing the whole online and transforming and blending and all those lovely words that we're hearing at the moment, pivoting the whole lot. I wonder, could click and collect be brought back, please? Because there's a lot of businesses who, despite doing all that's necessary to go digital and have this online presence, it's still of little value if they can't connect with a lot of local customers. And so, or with customers, posting or courier isn't effective across sectors. And so if there was a click and collect system where it could even be by appointment, I think it would be very effective in trying to bring activity back to certain sectors. Thank you, Minister.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Just to say that the trading online voucher and the business continuity voucher both were extremely successful last year. Business continuity maxed out very early on. What we found, to be frank and honest, with that was people were using it not to get professional advice in terms of how they may diversify or pivot to a new direction. A lot of people start using it maybe to pay their accountancy fees for the year, and it wasn't how it was intended originally. The trading online voucher, while it was administered through the local enterprise office, it was actually a scheme from the Department of Communications. That has moved over fully now to our department since the 1st of January. And there's a review on that scheme underway now to ensure that it is fit for purpose and to ensure that it does meet the needs and the challenges that businesses are facing. So I'll take on board what you're saying today, and I'll feed that into the review. It's timely that you should mention it with me, and I certainly will. The click and collect, as you know, that maintains, or it's still there for restaurants and for takeaways and all of that, which is beneficial. There was a decision suspend it for other items because the decision was to reduce mobility wherever practically possible in the last few months. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The figures are decreasing, and the movement is in the right trajectory, and that's where we wanted to go. But as I said in response to the first question, the situation is monitored on a daily basis and a weekly basis, and decisions are taken based on the figures that are presented. So it is something that will come back. Just when I don't want to give, I can't give clarity today, but it is something that will be one of the first things that will be back, because it does enable and it does support. And I'm thinking of your clothes shops and your bookstores and all of these that can provide a service in their locality. Once the click and collect is reintroduced, but it will come back, and I think it'll be one of the first things to come back.
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks, Minister. Stephen McCarthy had a question here for you, Minister. Can you ask what role the Minister sees invoice finance and alternative funders playing in the recovery for SMEs once government supports are phased out? Well, as I said in the reply to Eugene earlier on, like a non-financial I'm losing my train of thought here, but non-financial funders are being embraced where they are appropriately registered and regulated. There have been and will continue to be new funding opportunities. Historically, you wouldn't have had anybody other than the main financial institutions being able to administer or be part of schemes run by SBCI. Now we have that situation where it's expanded out much broader than our normal high street financial institutions, and non-financial institutions are now applicable to apply to provide these supports, and have been approved to do so in some instances in the past. So I do see it as a role into the future, most definitely, and certainly in the context, because our banking is is reducing, its concentration is reducing, with Ulster Bank looking to leave the market. We do need to look at other non-financial institutions of providing services to our SMEs. Yeah, thanks for the question, Stephen, and thanks, Minister. Oren Little has a question for you, Minister. Oren, if you want to take the floor there.
Hello, Minister. Thank you for having a direct conversation with us. It's very useful to be able to speak directly to somebody on, I suppose, issues that are every day affecting all of us in business. I have a question really on the SME Growth Plan talks about digital transformation. And I was wondering, could you expand on that a little bit? And also, would you consider maybe allowing for a grant for companies to audit their digital capacity so that they can be future-proofed a little bit? I mean, businesses mushroom and grow as they go along, and eventually they reach capacity digitally and have to either start again or bring in a new strategy, which can be expensive, but they may not know what actually is the right one. It would be worth being able to audit whatever the system is, or systems, to be able to change them.
Okay, thanks, Oren. Well, I suppose just to reiterate in relation to the SME Task Force and the Growth Plan, what I would say is that the plan itself came about from an enterprise grouping that were brought together. The recommendations aren't yet government policy, but we have an implementation group established to look through the recommendations to see which recommendations can be adopted as government policy, and then how we're going to implement them. So I don't think it'll be appropriate to comment on individual recommendations yet, because they're not government policy. But just to say, as I said at the outset, it was a very beneficial process that we have those recommendations, because they came from people in industry, in enterprise themselves, people who started off, some of them in SMEs, who have grown, and some who continue to in SMEs. So work is ongoing in that regard, Oren, and we'll see how that evolves over the coming weeks and months ahead. In relation to the second question you asked, I think it was about a specific grant, and I think maybe it was, did you reference the Trading Online grant, or was it another grant you mentioned? Sorry now.
Well, I was wondering, I suppose there isn't a grant that I'm actually talking about. It doesn't really exist anymore, but it could be the same as the business continuity or the Trading Online, but allowing small businesses or medium, these SMEs, to actually have an audit of how they work digitally, and to see what needs to change. Is it fit for purpose? Is it fit for future use?
I think that's a very good idea. And you know what? I'm part of a group. It's called the D9. It's a Digital 9 group. There are countries drawn from across the OECD, and we meet periodically, maybe every 6 or 8 weeks, and compare what's been done in other countries. And that's something that's actually been done in New Zealand at the moment, where they facilitate a digital audit, because some people may think themselves they're very digitally advanced, but it's only when somebody comes in, looks through their process, that they can see they can go much further. So again, just as I think it was Jenny mentioned earlier on, it's something that I'll feed into the review of the online review that's happening at the moment.
Thanks very much, Oren, and thanks, Minister. I suppose one of the hot topics really, Minister, and a few people have submitted this question in advance of the webinar, is that of broadband. West Waterford is a beautiful area, but quite a rural area, and you know, it's all very well to talk about digital and digital transformations and everything, but if you don't have good broadband and the good rollout of 5G and everything else, I think people might feel it's going to be very difficult to work remotely. So where are we with all that, with the rural broadband plan and the rollout of 5G?
Well, I suppose, you know, you've hit the nail on the head from a digital perspective. If you don't have the necessary infrastructure in place, it's very hard for anybody to make the transition. The rollout of the National Broadband Plan has been prioritised, and it's happening at an accelerated pace. I know that National Broadband Ireland have a very interactive website now. I met them only the other day myself in relation to my own constituency and particular areas. They have a strategy and a clear process in terms of how the rollout is going. Anybody can put in their air code into their website, and they will find out very clearly where they are on the process. I don't want to mislead anybody today and say that everybody is going to be done by 2022. That's not going to happen. The target date was 2025. We have brought that forward to 2024. And in the absence of that, what we have looked at is in particular areas which is going to be further down that process to establish quality broadband connection hubs in villages or in townslands. So I'm not familiar with your own territory there. I'm not familiar with where potentially are black spots, or where there might be a role for a community broadband point, so that where there is an area that has been left behind, or that will be further down the list in terms of when it's connection, that we can move in and ensure that there at least is a hub in that vicinity that people can go to and have access to high quality broadband. But realistically, before a nationwide high quality broadband is going to be in place is 2024. The National Broadband Plan has a website now up and running. You can input your air code. That will give you a clear indication in terms of where you are in that process, and to help people who are way down the list, where we are looking at establishing working hubs and facilities, community facilities, where people will have at least access to high quality broadband in their community while they wait for it to come to their door.
Okay, Minister, thanks very much for that. I believe Shane Connors has a question. Shane, if you want to take the floor there.
Thanks again, Mary. Minister, I was very interested to hear your comments during your presentation in relation to, let's call it examinership light, for want of a better term, just corporate restructuring and so on. That's a drum I've been beating myself for the last while. It's regardless of the cost of it, I think it's been a very underused mechanism for salvaging businesses historically. Could you just elaborate a little bit more as to what the process might look like? I know it's probably not signed off yet, but just in broad terms, I'd be very interested to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Well, firstly to say, yeah, you're right. The examinership process. The evidence would show that the only people who avail of it are more medium and larger companies. So people with north of 50 employees, that brings you into the medium category and above. The cost associated with the examinership process is tens of thousands of euros. So it is quite prohibitive for smaller companies. And as I said at the outset, it is internationally recognized as a good model, but at that cost, smaller companies can't avail of it. So what we're looking at is to mirror some of the principles of it, but to take it away from a court setting, to have a new restructuring process that would be administrative in nature, that would be more timely and more cost effective, and that we'd look at bringing the creditors together. And once you have 50% plus one in agreeable to that process, that would enable the person to work through a new restructure. It's like, Shane, you're in the accountancy game yourself. It is out for public consultation at the moment. I'm not quite sure. I know the deadline is for people to make submissions is early March. So I can share with you, or it's on my department website, the link to make a submission. So very, very open to you to make a submission and welcome any suggestions. It's at an early stage, but that's broadly what we're looking to do.
Great, yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And certainly I'd welcome the chance to have a look at it and make some submissions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shane. We're kind of coming up on time already. It really flies by, doesn't it? But if anybody has any additional questions you want to get in, maybe just send me a message and I'll have a look at them there. I have my eye on the chat here. But I know, Jenny Beresford, you did want to ask a question in relation to banks. You wanted to put something to the Minister.
That's right. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Minister. I suppose the last few weeks haven't been great for general public in Ireland as regards the whole banking announcements, with the loss of Ulster Bank in due course and the reduction of Bank of Ireland premises around the country, or Bank of Ireland operations. And I suppose just wondering, what's the government doing to ensure that there's competition in banking, and are they attracting maybe overseas banking, or what's the strategy?
I suppose banking is fundamentally changed in terms of how people do their banking, and that's as a consequence of that we've seen particularly the decision by Bank of Ireland to reduce their footprint in certain locations. The welcome, I suppose the only silver lining in that is that it helps to support post office network, which is also is being challenged, and there is and has been moves and advances by the post office network to start providing more banking services. And I think as a postmaster myself in a former life, I think that's where Post needs to go, is to start offering some of the services that the banks have been doing, and they have started that. The credit unions are also moving into this space as well. Credit unions have now are permitted to offer mortgages, something they weren't doing in the past. And we have some non-banking mortgage providers, I think Advant is the name of the company, who are now moved into the Irish market, which are offering very competitive fixed rates for mortgages. So it is something that's been kept under a constant review. Personally speaking, this is not government policy. So I actually believe that SBCI should be looking for a banking license themselves. an SBCI could in fact mirror what the ICS did in the 1980s, which was a state-backed financial institution whose primary aim was to support businesses. And I think that's something that I have said in my role as Minister of State. It's not something government has adopted yet, but it's something that I've suggested to the two relevant ministers, the Minister for Finance and Public Expenditure, and that was before Ulster Bank had announced their withdrawal from the market. So I think it's something that we'll have to look at, because it is important that you have competition in any sector, because without competition, you have the capacity for high prices. And that's not something we want to see happening.
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks, Minister Troy. Now, we're running out of time, but we do have a few more moments with the Minister, if that's okay, Minister, for a few short questions. Pat White is going to ask you something next. So, Pat, if you're there and you want to unmute yourself.
Minister, Pat White, Dungarvan here. Thank you for that session. Very good. And just a few, and also well done on all the supports over the last 12 months, which were very, very healthy and turned out to be quite successful. Just where are we, Minister? Just one concern in relation to the vaccine, right? Seems to be an awful lot of resources going into the minor stuff, as I call it, the stuff that's the culture that's driven by the populist community. And even when you hear things months later, Golfgate's still on the market and all of this type of stuff, then you listen over at the other side, you hear Paul Reid and very meekishly talking about the lack of supply based on the vaccine. What kind of work is going on behind the scenes to make sure that we're boxing at our weight, if not above our weight? Because that's the real stuff, that's the critical stuff. All that other stuff minor, there's been a lot of casualties, whether it's like Sean O'Rourke, Phil Hogan, lots of resources, lots of time going into all of that. You see the damage, whether you like him or don't like him, you know, in relation to the issue 3 weekends ago there, in relation to the Northern situation, which was kind of connected with Phil Hogan's replacement in Europe. And that basically, but I'd like to hear, you know, what's going on the real stuff, which is really the vaccine. Because it seems to be very poor performance over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Even yesterday's announcement don't seem to be too impressive. But well done and all the other stuff.
I think, Pat, number one, I'd say is you've hit the nail on the head. The vaccine rollout is the key priority for government over the next number of weeks and number of months, and we have to get it right. And we have proven where the supply has been delivered to the country, it has been rolled out. If you look at in the nursing homes, the congregated settings, the frontline workers working in our hospital situation, when they came in, they were vaccinated, and there's no vaccinations lying on shelves anywhere in Ireland. As soon as we get them, they're rolled out and they're administered, and that's rightly so. Rightly so. There has been poor communication in certain instances in terms of I heard on I was going to say the Sean O'Rourke show, you put his name in my mind there, the Claire Byrne show this morning in relation to, there was a particular area in the west of Ireland, 3 GP surgeries, 2 of the 3 got their vaccination, rolled it out as quick as possible, but the patients of the 3rd hadn't got their vaccination, hadn't been told when they were getting it, only got 24-hour notice when they eventually did get it, and it created uncertainty within that community. That can't be allowed to happen. But there is the wheels are in motion to ensure when we start getting it in significant quantities, which is really from April on. We have identified, I think, 30-something mass vaccination centres. 7,500 people have been trained up to administer the vaccine. They're going to be rolled out through GPs, pharmacists and dentists. So the only thing that is curtailing us at the moment is the supply issue. And as you know, we have signed up as part of the supply issue through the European Union. And we are, take out the UK because they're not a direct comparison, they're outside of the European Union. But when you look at the European Union, we have been in the top 3 per head of capita in terms of how quickly we're administering the vaccine since the very start. We want to stay there, if not go to the number one, because we now know, and from the Taoiseach's previous our latest address to the nation, is the vaccination process is the only show in town in terms of ensuring we get to a return to a normal sense of normality in terms of easing restrictions and opening up our economy again. So it's critically important. It is top priority for the government. We have proven, as I said, with the nursing homes, with the frontline workers, the only delay at the moment is delivery into this country. As soon as they come in, they are being rolled out and they are being put in people's arms.
But behind the scenes, isn't that the key question? You know, I know we can say we're part of the European community and all of that, but it is disappointing. That's the real stuff. Supply chain, sourcing in here at the moment. And I know we can queue up behind all the European bureaucrats, but it hasn't been impressive. Even, you know, that announcement there yesterday, Paul Reid, you know, basically we only seem to be operating on a low scale, and we're only coming in at about 85% delivery because we didn't get the supplies. But isn't that the real question, you know, ourselves and part of the Europeans, you know, that's very disappointing.
You're correct. The European Union, and just because you're pro-European doesn't mean you can't criticise where they got it wrong. And they got it wrong in terms of their advance ordering on certain vaccinations, without question. Like, I mean, if they had placed a higher order initially, we'd be much further on. But we can't go back into the past and reorder from the past. What we have done subsequently is increased our orders, and you'll see with the Johnson & Johnson, which hopefully is due to be, it has been approved in America. It's due to be approved by the European Medical Bureau, I think either later this week or early next week. I just don't have the date to hand. And we have somewhere in the region of 4 or 5 million of those vaccinations already ordered. So that's the real game changer from an Irish perspective. The supply of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but also the fact that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a single dose vaccination. At the moment, every vaccination that's been administered is a double dose, which is duplicating the work.
Yeah, no, well done and all the other stuff. It's just that I just would have a little bit of a concern in relation to that big picture stuff. But well done and all the other stuff.
I have a concern too, and we want to, because it's critical from Ireland's perspective.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Pat. Certainly an extremely relevant question, as were all the questions, but we are running out of time. So I think we will wrap now. And I would like at this point to thank everyone very much, but also to hand back to Chamber President David Walsh, who has a few more people to thank.
Sorry about that. Look, thank you again for your time today, to all our people that have actually checked in. I appreciate your time today. On behalf of Dungarvan West Waterford Chamber, I'd like to thank Shane Connors, one of our own members, Connors & Co, for their sponsorship of today's event. Obviously, I'd like to thank Mary O Neill for facilitating from WLR, and hopefully it might be a snippet or two on WLR later in the week from Mr. Troy. Robert Troy, look, Minister of State, Responsibility for Trade Promotion, Department of Enterprise, we really appreciate your time. As I said, the invitation is extended. Next time you're in the Southeast, we should certainly have a quick chat or a meeting or a lunch or something. We can do that. Look, thank you for your time and appreciate it, and thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, I think we will leave it at that. That was most enjoyable, and thanks very much to everyone who attended as well. And see you at the next one. And thank you very much again, Minister Troy. Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.